Hi. Today's topic is hearing better in restaurants. I did one other video called Noisy Spaces Tips, and that included restaurants. But this one focuses on things we can do without having to have a lot of fancy accessories and hardware. The first one is that if you know of a quiet restaurant, go again. Or at least often enough to reinforce why you're going there. Tell the people. If they're doing some good things, let them know. They appreciate the feedback. There is no one set of rules for hearing better in restaurants. And the problem is that any such list of rules would be very long and hard to remember. It's a very complex situation. So it's better to learn what's behind some of the rules that you hear, and that way it becomes more second nature for you. The first thing I do when I go into a restaurant is to, particularly a new restaurant, is to size up the space. Does it have tables or booths? I find that booths are quieter. Is there a bar? If so, I try to stay as far from it as I can. Are there TVs? Just like the bar, I try to stay as far away from those as I can. In fact, TVs tend to increase the noise from the bar patrons because they're trying to talk over the noise, I suppose. Does the place have uncovered windows or hard walls? There's two kinds of noise. One is direct noise from the people next to you, and the other is reflected noise. It's noise that's bouncing off of windows and walls. And if you sit where you're going to get both, it's a double whammy. So if I can identify uncovered windows and hard walls, I try to stay away from those. How about the floors? Are they carpeted? That's quieter than hard tile. A little harder to clean, but carpeted is quieter. How about drapes? Drapes absorb reflected sound, so they can be helpful. Some places have more than one dining area, more than one room. And I've found that the smaller rooms tend to be more quiet than the bigger ones, particularly if the bar is in the big room. How about table or booth size? If the table or booth accommodates more than 4 people, it's going to be noisier. I find that tables or booths for fewer than 4 people tend to be quieter because people aren't trying to talk over one another, and there's a greater tendency to have one conversation at a time. How about noise sources? Is the kitchen noisy and carry out into the dining room? Is there a service bar where the waitresses are clattering china and utensils? Good things to stay away from. If you're with somebody, it's a good idea to try to sit immediately next to that person so that you can converse directly and closely. Another thing I do is to, when I go into the restaurant, I look to see if they've got a sign that describes all the day's special. And I pay extra special attention to it, because that way, if I have trouble hearing the serving person with their recital, it doesn't really matter. I know what the specials are. Another thing I do when I go into a new place, and sometimes a regular place, is I confess my challenges to the seater, receptionist, and to my serving person. If they don't know you're having hearing difficulty, you can't blame them for not doing what would help. I use a couple of other aids, particularly with servers. One is a button. It's a 3-inch button that I wear when I go into a new restaurant in particular. It says, please. Obviously, I'm hard of hearing, but please speak clearly and face me. That's a big help. I'm sure you realize that. But I remind people. And when the waiting person comes back 2 or 3 times, she sees the button and she says, oh yeah, this is the fellow with the hearing difficulty. The other thing that I use, if I don't care for buttons, is this table tent. It's just an inexpensive photo easel, and I place that on the table, and that has the same effect. It reminds the server that I'm a little hard of hearing, and they can help by facing me and speaking clearly. It's also a pretty good reminder for all the people that I'm with. Doesn't hurt, and it's very inexpensive. One of the things you may want to consider is the things that I talked about in my other video on noisy spaces tips, and that is the use of pocket talkers in the middle of the table. Some are wired, some are wireless, but otherwise they can be a big help. Also, the people that make your hearing aids may offer a remote microphone that can be a big help. Particularly if you use these in concert with my favorite, the neck loop, because when you're using that and your T-coils, it shuts off the microphones in your hearing aids, and you don't hear all that background noise. All you hear is what's in the middle of the table. That's very, very helpful. Now, if you have mid-grade to high-grade hearing aids, I do, they usually come with a smartphone program for noisy spaces. And I use that, and it helps, because the better hearing aids have multiple microphones. Some are focused on sounds in front of you, and some are focused on sounds behind you. So you get a 360-degree effect. But when you activate the Noisy Spaces program, it tends to turn down the sensitivity on the rear microphones and focus on the forward microphones. The idea being that you're looking at the people you want to hear, and you don't want to hear all the background noise. So those programs can actually help, but you got to realize what they're doing, because what it means is you should try to sit with your back to the noise in the room. That way, when it suppresses the rearward microphones, it's suppressing the sounds you don't want to hear. And like I say, using the remote microphones can be a big help. One of the things that universally works when I go into restaurants, and it sounds contrary to common sense, but it works. And that is to turn your hearing aids down 1 or 2 notches. be surprised. You would think in a noisy space that increasing the volume would be more helpful. That's not the case. By decreasing the volume, you're having a greater effect on the noise than you are on the people in close proximity. So try turning your hearing aids down a notch. That's one of the reasons that I don't think a lot about hearing aids with so-called automatic volume control. They tend to do the wrong thing in certain circumstances. Well, I hope all these ideas have helped you, and if it sounds like a lot, remember my admonition to try and understand what's behind the ideas rather than come up with a list. If it helps, you can watch this video a second time and kind of cement those ideas in your mind. Meantime, get back to those places that are relatively quiet and make sure the owner understands why you're returning. For now, good hearing.